Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about finding your community and support systems when it comes to living with chronic illness. And I think that this is really important because it's one thing to get support from, say, your physician or those clinicians, people who take care of your disease, but it's very different than getting support from, say, someone who's living with the disease or living with a similar disease and is going through some of the similar things. So I think that there is power in community, and there is power in hearing other stories and hearing from people who are in it with you. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. Hey everybody, it's Aaron. Welcome back to my channel. So like I said, I want to talk about the power of community and finding your support system when it comes to living with any chronic illness or rare disease. So I live with Crohn's disease, a form of inflammatory bowel disease, and then I also have a rare genetic disease called hypophosphatasia. And I can't tell you how huge and important it's been for me to find that community and the people who I can lean on for support and really just talk about some of those things that not everybody experiences, that not everybody gets, but finding people who do get it in some way goes a really, really long way in trying to cope with these diseases. So a little bit about kind of the community from my standpoint. So I actually, when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease back in 2009, I did not know anybody with Crohn's disease. And so one of the biggest things that I wanted to do, I was 17 at the time, and I was getting ready to go to college, and just went to college and started and then got a diagnosis. And so it was really difficult for me to find, to kind of cope and to try to find somebody who was going through something similar with me. And so what I started, and this was in 2009, 2010, I actually started a support community on the internet, on Facebook, for Crohn's disease or inflammatory bowel disease. And really the whole motivation for that was to meet other people with Crohn's disease or inflammatory bowel disease and try to just talk to people. And it's scary being diagnosed with a new disease, especially a chronic disease, one that doesn't have any cure. And so not knowing kind of that long-term outcome and what others have gone through, it was very scary for me. So I really started it to try to meet others with this disease and see what they've been going through. And as I've talked about before, that community is still going on today. That actually launched my patient advocacy work that I do, and that community has over 26,000 people in it, and it kind of got in at the time when Facebook pages and things were really coming to, actually really coming out, and then becoming a bigger thing for people. And I think that's also when a lot of the kind of online support that patients seek started really increasing, because the online community mended a gap for a lot of people, a lot of patients, just in general. And so being able to connect with hundreds of thousands of people who have a disease that's very similar to yours is really cool. And so I think that online communities really mended a gap, and I got in early on with that. And so I initially started that to just meet others, and that blossomed and grew into something that I never could have expected, and it helped me tremendously. So I did obviously meet and talk to others with this disease, and just really talking about it and seeing what others went through and what treatments they were on and their experience with those treatments, and was just really, really cool and helped me so much, like more than I can probably ever put into words. And I think that's awesome, because you don't really know what you need in terms of support or things like that until you just get it, until you find it. And so finding that support was huge, and I've kept that community going today, even though I am in such a better place now with coping and dealing with the disease. I've kept that community going because there's other people out there that were like me, that are newly diagnosed, or people who need continuous support. They need people in their corner to talk to, and to really just honestly sometimes vent. And so the power of community can never be overstated, in my opinion. And so again, when you are going through something like living with a disease that doesn't have a cure, that you have no clue what the long-term outlook will look like, and especially with a disease like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis or inflammatory bowel disease, it differs so much between different people and the way that it presents itself, and it's just a very challenging disease to live with and can be challenging to treat. And so, knowing all of that and not having someone to talk to about it who is in there is just really challenging. So that power of community is just so big, and finding your support system, whether that is an online community, whether that is friends or family, is something that will really help you really help you get through a lot of things and go a long way. And so I think it's very important to continue to foster community and foster these conversations, because there's, like I said, there's so many people out there who are newly diagnosed. There are people getting newly diagnosed all the time with inflammatory bowel disease, but with chronic diseases and rare diseases, they are getting diagnosed every single day. And being able to find that information online in that community is huge. And when I was diagnosed with my rare disease, that presented a whole other slew of challenges and unknowns. And one of the huge differences was, so I'd been living with Crohn's disease for 8 years by the time I was diagnosed with my rare disease, and my online community for inflammatory bowel disease had grown, and I'd done a lot of patient advocacy work, so I was very familiar with the world of online communities and patient advocacy and dealing with my own health problems and advocating for myself. But when I was diagnosed with this rare disease, I again needed community. I needed to find people who were living with this disease and what they were going through, and if they were on treatment, and what kind of their experience was. And I needed that support. I was back into a very similar situation when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I didn't know anybody with the disease, especially living. It's a very rare, it's considered an ultra rare disease, and so there are not a lot of people in general. There are a couple of people, I believe, in the state that I live in that have this disease, and there's only 1,000, 2,000 patients in the United States that currently are diagnosed with it. And so it was very challenging to find anybody in person, but we are in the day and age of the internet and online community, and I was able to find that. And that was something that was huge for me. Again, finding that community of patients who were in it, who were in similar shoes as me, living with this disease, being able to talk to them and ask them what their experience was, and what is their experience with the medication, and how has their disease progressed, and what are some tips and tricks and all of these things that I can use to cope with and start to feel a little better about having such a serious diagnosis. And so finding community, especially early on in your diagnosis, I think is crucial for your long-term, even long-term care and coping, but mental health. I think that being able to vent to a community, and I have friends now that I've known for a very long time that live with inflammatory bowel disease, and they've become their patients, and I've met them through patient advocacy work, and they're some very close people in my life that I would go to war for. We both kind of a mutual thing where we talk about living with this disease, and when things come up, like we have issues with the insurance, or we've been in remission and we start to flare, like we just vent about it. And it goes a long way. It really does. And it's just so different than, like venting to your physician, or like me, I've been in therapy, mental health therapy, and being able to talk that through with a therapist or psychiatrist, psychologist is huge. That helped me early on too, like realizing that my mental health was just as important as my physical health, and being able to work through that with a professional. But it's still, truthfully, it's not quite as, I don't want to say good, but it doesn't feel quite as good when you're venting to somebody who's been there, right? So I think it's hugely important to seek therapy if you need to learn how to cope with living with these diseases, because they provide you with things that can help you deal with it and, like I said, cope and help your mental health. And there's also the additional talking to people who have been through this with you. And so how do you kind of find your community, right? How do you find that community of people that you can vent to and talk to and ask questions about living with the disease? One of the biggest things is honestly now is kind of looking on the internet, right? I mean, if you say you've just been diagnosed with some disease, and I can guarantee you that there is probably some sort of online support, whether that's a page, a group, a website, a nonprofit where they have these communities. And so I think that you can start there. And I think reaching out to nonprofits and looking on the internet is a really good way to kind of find communities, especially in kind of the rare disease space where there's not a lot of people, but I can bet you there are several people kind of on the internet posting about it or talking about it and can point you in a direction. And so I think that that's a great place to start, but you can also, again, maybe talk to your physician if they know of any support groups. There are a lot of support groups that are held for chronic illnesses, and then go from there. I mean, I think nonprofits are huge. A lot of these conditions have some sort of nonprofit, one or two, that are kind of associated with that. And so they also can point you in a really good direction. So I think that starting there is great. And I also don't want to say that you don't always have to have somebody that has your specific disease. But for instance, I live with hypophosphatasia, the rare bone disease. It's a rare disease, and there are so many things that I experience living just with a rare disease that a lot of rare disease patients live with and deal with. And so I've talked to a lot of other rare disease patients and kind of how they deal with it and navigate and go through life with a rare disease and what they've done. And that's been a huge help as well, because there are so many things that, while our diseases are different, a lot of the things that we face are very similar. And that is true for other chronic illnesses as well, like inflammatory bowel disease. There are a lot of kind of overlap with, say, diseases like psoriasis and all these autoimmune diseases. So there's a ton of overlap in things that we kind of deal with. And so you can get a lot of support from different disease states, different people with different diseases. We all have something in common. One of the things that we have in common with those others is that we have a chronic disease. We have an incurable disease. And a lot of times some of the treatments are the same. And so there's a lot of overlap like that. If you can't find somebody specific, just remember that there are a lot of people out there that live with a chronic illness or rare disease and can provide a ton of support and a lot of support for you. And so, again, the community is huge, and finding your support system and learning how to cope is giant, and it will help you get through some of those hardest days that you go through. It will help you keep pushing forward, and to know that there's somebody that you can talk to and people out there who want to help you. And when you're going through kind of the thick of it, or maybe you've had surgery or treatments aren't working, and maybe you're going to a couple of different doctors, and when you're just in that thick of it of living with a chronic illness, having community to lean on and to vent to and to ask for support will get you through some of those hardest days. Because knowing that there are people that have been through something very similar, and they may be in it with you right now, but to hear how people have dealt with that and come through that, and the ways that they dealt with it and came through it, just really goes a long way and means a lot. And for me, I mean, there's so many people out there, and if they're watching this video, they know who they are, that I've leaned into and asked questions about and became lifelong friends with while we deal with living with these diseases, and they've got me through some really tough times and given me some great advice on how to advocate for myself and what to ask my doctor, and where to go for assistance with maybe paying for a drug. There's just so many things that you can learn from other patients. But again, talking to somebody who has been in it, who is in your shoes or very similar shoes, just is unmatched in terms of support, truthfully. And while there's so many people who go through these things and there's so much overlap, just finding that community, I promise you, will get you through so much. And again, I want to plug plug in. If you, especially newly diagnosed, if you're having trouble coping or anything like that, definitely seek some mental health help, some counseling. It's huge. It helped me. I still every now and then will do it, and it's helped me learn how to cope. And I think using those coping mechanisms, while also leaning into your community, can just really, really change the game and how you deal with chronic illness and how you think about it and how you cope with it. So, again, find your community, find that support. If you don't have a community or have support, whether or not you have inflammatory bowel disease or hypophosphatasia, if you need help, support, community, please let me know. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to be that support for you, that community for you, and maybe help you find a community if that's what you need. But just remember that doing this alone just makes it so much harder, and knowing that there are so many people out there that want to help you, that can help you, that will help you, leaning into them will make this journey a lot easier. And what we deal with and the things that we deal with are not what regular people deal with, what we call healthy people, people who don't have chronic illness. They don't deal with this, they don't understand it, and they don't really, it's hard for them to grasp, honestly. It's hard to grasp what living with a chronic illness is like until you have one. And so finding your community and that support is going to get you through some of those really hard days, and they will be there for you throughout it all. So again, it's crucial, huge. I'm happy to help and help you find your community. I hope that this was beneficial, and thank you for watching. And if you're going through it and you're in it and you're going through a tough time, I'm here for you. Please reach out if you need me. And thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.